Before you close your eyes tonight, let me tell you a gentle story, one that drifts in like a familiar lullaby you almost remember from childhood, a story that does not ask anything of you except to rest and listen, as though the night itself has leaned close to whisper something kind. There was once a place that only appeared when the world grew quiet enough to notice it, a valley folded between soft hills where time slowed on purpose, and nothing ever hurried, not even the stars as they crossed the sky. The people who found this valley never meant to arrive there, and yet they always came at exactly the right moment, usually when their hearts felt tired in ways sleep alone could not fix. On the edge of this valley stood a small cottage with windows that glowed like warm amber in the dusk. The light inside was never bright, never sharp, only steady and welcoming, as if it understood how sensitive the night could be. A narrow path of smooth stones led to the door, each stone worn gently by years of unhurried footsteps. Inside the cottage lived a woman named Elara, though she rarely introduced herself because names felt less important than feelings here. Her hair had long ago turned the color of moonlit silver, and her voice carried the calm assurance of someone who had listened more than she had spoken across a lifetime. Elara kept no clocks in her home. Instead, she measured time by breath, by heartbeat, by the slow settling of the soul. Every evening, just as the sky softened from blue into indigo, Elara would place a kettle on the stove and hum a melody so quiet it barely existed, a tune that seemed to smooth the air itself. The steam from the kettle curled upward like a sleepy sigh, filling the room with warmth and the faint scent of chamomile and honey. On this particular night, the valley felt especially still, as though the world had paused to listen. Outside, fireflies drifted lazily among the tall grasses, their glow pulsing in an unspoken rhythm, slow and reassuring. The wind moved through the trees with careful hands, mindful not to disturb anything resting. Elara opened her cottage door, not because she expected someone, but because she trusted the night to know when a door should be open. She stood there quietly, her presence gentle and unassuming, and waited. Somewhere far beyond the valley, someone was struggling to sleep, turning from side to side, carrying thoughts that refused to soften. And though neither could explain how, the path of smooth stones began to shimmer faintly, as if remembering its purpose. Elara smiled, not in anticipation, but in recognition, the way one does when a familiar story begins again. She stepped back into the warmth of her home, leaving the door open just enough, and the night breathed a little easier, knowing it had found a safe place to begin. The path of smooth stones did not glow brightly, only enough to be noticed by someone who was already listening with their heart rather than their eyes. And as the night deepened, the valley seemed to draw a slow, steady breath, as if preparing to welcome another weary soul home. The grasses along the path bent gently inward, not blocking the way, but guiding it, their tips brushing together with a sound softer than a sigh. Each step taken upon the stones felt lighter than the last, as though the earth itself had decided to carry part of the weight. Above, the sky unfolded into layers of velvet darkness, scattered with stars that blinked patiently, never demanding attention. As the traveler moved closer to the cottage, the warmth from its windows spread outward like a quiet promise. It was not the warmth of heat alone, but of belonging, the kind that settles behind the ribs and loosens something tight that had been held for far too long. The light did not spill harshly onto the ground. Instead, it rested there, calm and contained, as if respecting the night's need for gentleness. Inside, Elara moved slowly, every motion deliberate and unhurried. She placed 2 cups on the small wooden table by the hearth, though only one person had yet arrived. The cups were simple, smooth from years of use, each holding the memory of countless evenings much like this one. She poured the tea carefully, allowing the steam to rise and fade at its own pace. The fire in the hearth made no sudden crackles, only a low, steady glow that shifted lazily from gold to amber. Shadows moved along the walls like drowsy thoughts, stretching and settling again. Everything in the cottage seemed to understand that this was not a place for urgency, only for easing into rest. When the door finally opened, it did so without sound, as though it had been waiting for the exact right moment. Cool night air drifted inside, carrying with it the faint scent of distant rain and wildflowers. Elara looked up, her eyes kind and knowing, and offered a smile that asked no questions and required no answers. She gestured gently toward the chair near the fire, its cushions worn soft by time and quiet company. Sitting there felt like being wrapped in a memory you could not quite place, but trusted completely. The chair seemed to mold itself perfectly, supporting without holding too tightly, encouraging stillness without confinement. Elara sat opposite, cradling her own cup, her presence steady and reassuring. She did not speak right away. Silence here was not empty. It was full and generous, allowing the mind to slow down naturally, like a river widening as it approaches the sea. Outside, the fireflies gathered closer to the windows, their lights pulsing more slowly now, matching the rhythm of the room. The wind softened further, barely moving the leaves, as though even it had decided to rest. At last, Elara spoke, her voice low and smooth, blending seamlessly with the crackle of the fire and the hush of the night. She began not with instructions nor explanations, but with a story that felt familiar, as if it had always been waiting just beneath the surface, ready to carry the listener somewhere safe, somewhere unhurried, where sleep would arrive not as a demand, but as a gift. Elara's voice did not travel far, yet it reached exactly where it needed to go, settling gently into the space behind the listener's thoughts, where worries usually lingered, and smoothing them as one might smooth a wrinkled blanket at the end of a long day. She spoke of the valley as it once was, and as it always would be, a place shaped not by hands or tools, but by care. Long before the cottage had windows glowing with evening light, the land itself had learned how to rest. The hills curved inward protectively, the way shoulders lean closer on a cold night. Streams wandered instead of rushing, taking their time to find the sea, unbothered by distance. As Elara spoke, the fire seemed to lean closer, its warmth deepening, not hotter, just more present. The listener might notice their breath following the same rhythm as her words now, slower, fuller, unforced. Each inhale felt welcome, each exhale felt like a small release. She described how the valley listened to those who arrived carrying too much. It never asked for explanations. It simply absorbed the excess, like moss soaking up rain, holding it quietly until the ground beneath could breathe again. No feeling was ever too heavy here. No thought was ever unwelcome. Outside, the night pressed softly against the windows, curious but respectful. A distant owl called once, low and rounded, then fell silent again, satisfied. The stars overhead continued their patient watching, each one steady, dependable, exactly where it was meant to be. Elara paused often as she spoke, allowing the silence to do its own gentle work. In those pauses, the room seemed to grow larger, as if making space for comfort to spread. The tea and the cups cooled gradually, releasing a soothing aroma that lingered in the air like a memory of kindness. She told of travelers who came before, each one different, yet all arriving with the same quiet hope they might finally rest. Some stayed only one night, others lingered longer, learning how to move through their days more softly. The valley welcomed them all without distinction, because rest was not something to be earned here, it was something offered freely. As the story unfolded, the boundary between listening and being within the story blurred. The listener might feel as though they were sitting not just by the fire, but inside the valley itself, wrapped in its calm, supported by its steady presence. Thoughts that once demanded attention now drifted like leaves on slow water, passing by without urgency. Elara's eyes reflected the firelight as she spoke, not sharp or bright, but warm and steady. There was reassurance in knowing she had told this story many times, and yet never grew tired of it. Each telling was slightly different, shaped by who was listening, shaped by what they needed most. Her voice softened further toward the end, as if easing the story into a resting place of its own. The fire settled, the night deepened, and without anyone needing to say it aloud, the room understood that this was only the beginning of a longer, gentler journey, one that would continue at exactly the pace sleep prefers. As the quiet settled more deeply into the cottage, Elara shifted slightly in her chair, the movement slow and careful, as though she were adjusting the night itself. The fire responded with a gentle glow, brightening just enough to cast a soft halo across the room, then easing back again, content to simply be. She began to speak of the path beyond the cottage, the one that wound through the valley like a thoughtful pause between moments. By day it was ordinary, made of earth and stone, but by night it carried a different quality, one that could only be felt, never fully seen. Those who walked it often said their thoughts grew lighter with every step, not because they were forgotten, but because they no longer needed to be held so tightly. As Elara described the path, the air seemed to thicken with calm. The walls of the cottage felt farther away now, as if the space had expanded to make room for imagination to wander gently. The listener might notice their shoulders lowering, their jaw softening, their body responding before the mind even realized it was safe. Outside, The valley rested under a blanket of moonlight. The hills reflected its glow faintly, their curves softened further, almost dreamlike. Somewhere nearby, water moved slowly over smooth stones, its sound steady and unhurried, repeating the same soothing phrase again and again until meaning dissolved into comfort. Elara spoke of how the valley understood exhaustion, the kind that seeped into the bones and lingered long after the day had ended. It never rushed to fix anything. Instead, it offered presence, allowing tiredness to be felt without resistance, trusting that rest would follow naturally once it was no longer fought. She paused again, lifting her cup and taking a small sip of tea. The motion was unremarkable, and yet it felt significant, as though it marked a gentle turning point. The warmth of the tea traveled slowly, spreading outward, mirroring the way calm was spreading now through the room. The fire crackled once, softly, then returned to its steady hush. Shadows leaned and shifted, settling into new shapes that felt familiar and friendly. Nothing in the cottage demanded attention. Everything simply accompanied the moment. Alara's voice lowered further as she spoke of the night's deeper hours, when the world grew even quieter and sleep moved closer, padding softly, never announcing its arrival. In the valley, sleep was not something chased or forced. It was something that arrived when invited by stillness. The listener might feel as though time itself had loosened its grip. Minutes no longer mattered, only the rhythm of breath, the gentle cadence of Alara's words, and the subtle warmth of the fire existed now. Thoughts that once circled endlessly began to slow, then drift, then dissolve altogether. As she finished this part of the story, Elara allowed the silence to stretch comfortably, trusting it to hold everything that had been said. The valley outside remained steady and watchful, the cottage warm and secure, and the path beyond waited patiently, ready to be walked when the moment felt right, knowing there was no need to hurry anywhere at all. The silence after Alara's last words was not empty, but full, in a way that felt almost tangible, like a soft blanket settling gently over everything in the room. The fire continued its quiet glow, and the night outside seemed to lean closer, listening without expectation. After a while, Elara spoke again, her voice even softer now, as if she were careful not to disturb the calm that had taken root. She told of a small clearing just beyond the hills, a place where the grass grew especially fine, and the air always felt a little warmer. It was said that the clearing remembered every peaceful moment that had ever happened there, holding them like pressed flowers between the pages of time. When someone sat in that clearing, Elara explained, the ground beneath them seemed to breathe in time with their body. The earth offered support without pressure, allowing muscles to release slowly, one by one, as though each had been patiently waiting for permission to rest. Even thoughts, stubborn as they could be, often found themselves softening there, loosening their edges. As she spoke, the scent of the tea lingered gently, blending with the faint aroma of wood smoke in night air. It was a familiar combination, comforting without being distracting, like a memory that brought ease instead of longing. The listener might notice how naturally their breathing had slowed now, each breath deeper and more complete than the last. Elara described how the clearing was never crowded. It welcomed one presence at a time, giving each visitor its full attention. The stars above seemed to arrange themselves differently there, shining just a little closer, their light warm rather than distant. Fireflies drifted lazily at the edges, their glow unhurried, never flickering too fast. She spoke of how some people would lie back in the grass, gazing upward, while others preferred to sit quietly, eyes closed, simply feeling the night around them. There was no right way to be in the clearing. It met each person exactly where they were, asking nothing more than that they arrive. As Elara paused, the room felt heavier with comfort, as though gravity itself had softened. The chair by the fire seemed even more supportive now, holding without effort. The warmth from the hearth reached deeper, settling into the chest and limbs, easing places that had been tight without being noticed. Outside, the wind had nearly stilled, moving only enough to remind the trees they were not alone. Somewhere far off, water continued its slow conversation with stone, repeating its soothing pattern without variation, without urgency. Elara finished this part of the story with a quiet assurance that the clearing was always there, whether remembered or not. It did not fade when forgotten. It simply waited, patient and steady, ready to offer its calm again whenever it was needed. Her voice faded naturally into silence, and the cottage held that silence with care, as though cradling something precious. The night deepened further, and rest drew closer still, unannounced and unhurried, exactly as it was meant to be. The quiet that followed felt deeper now, layered and reassuring, as though the valley itself had wrapped its arms around the cottage and settled in for the night. Elara remained still, allowing the calm to stretch and soften on its own, trusting that nothing needed to be filled or fixed. After some time, she began again, her voice moving slowly, like a hand tracing a familiar path. She spoke of how the valley changed as the night grew older, not in dramatic ways, but through subtle shifts that only those at rest ever noticed. The air became thicker with peace. Sounds traveled shorter distances. Even the stars seemed to blink more slowly, content to remain where they were. She described a gentle stream that ran near the clearing, its waters shallow and clear, reflecting the sky above like a quiet mirror. The stream never hurried, even after rain. It moved with intention rather than speed, carrying small reflections of moonlight along its surface, letting them drift away when the moment passed. Elara explained how people sometimes sat beside the stream, watching the water move without trying to follow it. Doing so, she said, helped thoughts learn how to pass by in the same way, present for a moment, then gone without resistance. The stream did not cling to what it carried. It simply allowed everything to continue on its way. As her words flowed, the warmth in the cottage deepened further. The fire glowed lower now, steady and dependable, no longer needing to assert itself. Shadows rested where they fell, no longer shifting, as if they too had found a comfortable position. The listener might feel a pleasant heaviness spreading through their limbs, a sense of being fully supported, fully allowed to let go. Muscles that had held tension without awareness began to release gently, responding to the quiet permission the night offered so freely. Elara spoke of how the valley never judged wakefulness. Some nights, she said, rest arrived slowly, pausing along the way, easing closer in stages. The valley welcomed this as well, understanding that even quiet wakefulness could be nourishing when held in kindness. Outside, the moon rose higher, its light soft and diffuse, bathing the hills in a silvery glow that felt neither bright nor dark, but perfectly balanced. A faint breeze moved through the grasses, just enough to create a whispering sound that blended seamlessly with the hush of the night. Elara's voice grew slower still, her pauses lengthening, leaving space for the listener's own calm to deepen. Words mattered less now. What mattered was the feeling beneath them, the steady reassurance that nothing needed to be done, nowhere needed to be reached. As she brought this part of the story to a close, the stream continued its gentle movement, the clearing rested beneath the stars, and the cottage remained warm and watchful. Everything was exactly as it should be, and sleep, patient and kind, moved closer without being called, arriving in its own perfect time. By now, the night had settled into its deepest, most forgiving stillness, the kind that feels wide and endless, yet somehow close and protective at the same time. Elara remained seated by the fire, her presence unchanging, like a gentle anchor that did not need to be seen to be felt. She began to speak again, though her words were fewer now, spaced farther apart, allowing each one to land softly before the next arrived. She spoke of a time late in the night when even the valley seemed to dream, when the land rested not just in body, but in memory as well. In those hours, she said, the air carried a faint shimmer, almost imperceptible, a quiet magic born not of spells or wonder, but of accumulated peace. Every restful breath ever taken in the valley lingered there, layering comfort upon comfort, until the night itself felt gently alive. Elara described how, during these hours, the clearing and the stream grew quieter still. The water moved more slowly, if that were possible, smoothing itself into long, unbroken reflections. The grass lay flatter, no longer stirred by wind, holding the warmth of the day and releasing it gradually into the night. The listener might feel their own thoughts thinning now, no longer forming complete sentences, no longer needing to. Sensations took their place instead. The warmth of the room, the steady support beneath them, the simple rhythm of breath moving in and out without effort. Elara spoke of how the valley taught patience to those who lingered there, not through instruction, but through example. Nothing rushed, nothing resisted. Everything unfolded at exactly the pace required for rest to arrive naturally. Outside the cottage, the fireflies had settled into the grasses, their lights dimmed, resting. The stars held their positions, unblinking, their quiet presence a reminder that stability did not require effort. Elara's voice softened further, nearly blending into the hush around it. She spoke now as if addressing not just the listener, but the night itself, affirming its work, trusting its rhythm. Her words became simpler, more spacious, leaving room for silence to do most of the speaking. The fire had lowered to a gentle glow, its warmth still present but unobtrusive, like a kind thought lingering in the background. The cottage felt smaller and safer now, its walls closer, its corners rounded by shadow and calm. As this part of the story came to rest, Elara allowed the silence to stretch longer than before, confident it could carry everything forward. The valley slept lightly, the clearing dreamed softly, and rest moved ever closer, unannounced and unhurried, ready to settle in wherever it was welcomed. The night had grown still enough that every sound seemed deliberate, every movement meaningful in its own quiet way. Elara sipped her tea slowly, listening not for anything specific, but simply letting the warmth and aroma sink into her senses. The room was alive with gentle calm, yet it did not intrude. It simply existed, patiently, comfortably. She began again, her voice drifting slowly through the room, weaving its way into the listener's awareness. She spoke of the trees that surrounded the clearing, ancient and steady, their branches curved as if offering protection, their leaves whispering only when it suited them. They had learned to bend without breaking, and in their patience they taught something essential to anyone willing to listen. The valley itself seemed to hum, though softly, with the kind of resonance that can only be felt and never fully heard. A rhythm that matched the slow pulse of the listener's heartbeat, reinforcing a sense of ease that had begun to settle deeply in the body. Muscles loosened, shoulders sank, and the mind grew quiet, allowing gentle images to emerge without effort. Elara spoke of the way the clearing could hold time differently, making moments stretch longer without dragging, so that every breath, every sensation, every thought could be fully experienced and then released. Here, she said, nothing pressed to be understood or accomplished. There was only the slow unfolding of presence. Outside, the night continued its tender work. A soft breeze passed through the valley, stirring the grass so lightly that it made no sound but the faintest suggestion of movement. Stars reflected in the stream, their pale light rippling along the surface in a subtle dance, like a lullaby made of silver threads. Elara's voice became more rhythmic, almost hypnotic, as she described the visitors who had come to the valley over the years. Each had brought their own quiet burdens, and each had been met without judgment or hurry. Some had rested for a night, others longer. All had left a trace of peace behind, subtle but enduring, woven into the very fabric of the land. The listener might notice how sleep begins to approach like a careful companion here, patient and unassuming. Thoughts that once circled endlessly now pause, dangling like leaves on the gentle current of the stream. Breathing continues slow and steady, an unspoken reassurance that everything is safe and allowed to be exactly as it is. Elara's hands rested on her cup, her fingers tracing its rim with the smallest of movements. There was a sense of ritual in the simplicity, of mindfulness without intention. The night, the valley, the fire, the stream, the
clearing, all of it seemed to exist to teach stillness, to invite gentle surrender to what was waiting just beyond awareness. By the time she paused, the room was suffused with a comforting rhythm, an invisible pulse matching the breath, the heartbeat, the quiet flow of everything around. And in that space, the listener is cradled, ready to drift further, carried on the steady, unhurried tide of the valley's night, where sleep moves ever closer, tender, patient, and entirely safe.
The valley seemed to stretch even wider now, though nothing had physically changed. Time itself felt softer, more malleable, as if it had paused to accommodate every slow, deliberate breath taken inside the cottage. Elara remained in her chair, a steady presence among the gentle flicker of the firelight. She spoke of the stream again, following it as it curved quietly through the clearing, carrying small silver reflections across its surface. She described the stones that lined its shallow bed, smooth and cool, shaped by countless nights of patient water flow. Each stone seemed to hold a memory, a quiet echo of every moment of stillness that had ever existed here. The listener might feel a weightless calm begin to settle across their body, as though gravity itself had softened to allow ease. Every muscle that had been tight now gently let go. Every thought that had demanded attention began to drift, unhurried, like leaves floating along the stream. Elara's voice, soft and measured, moved like a gentle current through the room. She described the small creatures of the night, the fireflies that glowed lazily, the owl that called just once before settling back into the dark. Each one moved at its own pace, doing only what felt necessary, and the world around them responded with understanding and patience. She told of the visitors who sometimes sat by the stream's edge, leaning into its gentle rhythm, listening to the water as it carried not just reflections, but a quiet reassurance that everything would unfold in its own time. Here, she said, it was not about achieving anything. Rest was not a goal. It was a gift freely offered to anyone willing to receive it. Outside, the night air was cool and soothing, flowing through the valley like a whispered promise. Grasses bent softly, almost imperceptibly, brushing against one another without sound. The stars above twinkled slowly, evenly, steady and dependable, as if each one were a guardian of the quiet below. Elara paused, allowing her words to linger in the warm air of the cottage. She let the silence stretch, letting the listener's own awareness fill the space with the calm it had begun to claim. The firelight shifted slightly, painting long, gentle shadows across the walls, shadows that seemed to echo the rhythm of the stream outside. She spoke of the clearing beyond, where the grass felt soft beneath tired bodies, and where the earth itself seemed to cradle anyone who settled there. The valley, she explained, had learned over countless nights how to support, how to nurture, how to hold without pressure. It taught patience by embodying it. By the time Elara's words faded, the room had become a cocoon of warmth, light, and calm. The stream continued its quiet journey outside. The stars kept their watch, and the night moved steadily onward. The listener, cradled by the valley's patient embrace, began to sense the gentle approach of sleep, moving closer, unhurried, entirely safe, and completely welcome. The night had settled into a rhythm that was almost tangible. each breath and sound measured, deliberate, comforting. Elara remained near the fire, her presence steady, a quiet lighthouse in the gentle darkness. The warmth of the hearth wrapped around the room like a soft, protective blanket. She spoke softly of the hills surrounding the clearing, their curves flowing like slow waves, their shadows shifting with patience. Each hill, she said, had learned over centuries how to hold weight without strain, how to bend under the soft touch of wind without breaking. Travelers often notice this subtle grace, though they might not name it. It felt familiar in a way that invited trust and calm. Elara's voice carried the listener through the path again, the stones glimmering faintly under moonlight, guiding each step without urgency. Every footfall on the smooth surface seemed to lighten burdens left unseen, like a soft exhale that carried away worry and fatigue. The path did not hurry anyone, it simply accompanied them. She described the small creatures of the night as if they were teachers of stillness. Fireflies drifted lazily, their soft glimmers echoing the warmth of the hearth. Owls watched from hidden branches, silent and steady, their calm presence reassuring to anyone awake in the valley. Even the breeze moved slowly, bending leaves with gentle care, its sound like a whispered lullaby. Elara paused often, letting the silence expand between her words. The listener might notice how naturally their body followed this rhythm, how tension melted away without thought, how the mind grew quiet as each soft pause stretched just long enough for peace to settle. She spoke of the clearing's magic, not a magic of spells or sudden wonders, but one woven from kindness, patience, and care. Here, rest was understood. The valley remembered every moment of calm ever experienced, and it shared that memory freely, holding anyone who arrived with gentle arms, invisible yet undeniable. Outside, the stream continued its quiet course, carrying reflections of moonlight along the stones, flowing neither too fast nor too slow, simply moving in harmony with the night. The stars above glimmered with patience, and the wind whispered just enough to remind the grasses of their gentle presence. Everything existed in balance, in a soft rhythm that encouraged surrender to calm. Elara's words grew softer still, moving like a current around the listener, coaxing awareness inward, toward breath, toward sensation, toward ease. She described how the valley never judged the night or its guests, only accompanied them, as a kind companion would, letting each step, each thought, each sigh find its place in the quiet. As she concluded this part, the firelight flickered just slightly, shadows folding in on themselves, the room holding everything with warmth and patience. The listener could feel, more than hear, the approach of sleep, not forced, not hurried, but arriving gently, steadily, fully welcomed by the valley, the clearing, the stream, and the night itself.
The night had deepened further, stretching its quiet fingers across the valley, and every sound seemed to soften, as though the world itself had exhaled slowly and settled in for a long, patient rest. Elara remained seated, her posture relaxed, the soft pulse of warmth that the fire offered. She began again, her voice almost blending into the stillness, gentle and flowing, describing the valley in ways that invited the listener to feel rather than imagine. She spoke of how the hills cradled the clearing, folding inward protectively, forming a gentle circle that held everything inside, a sanctuary shaped not by walls, but by attention and care. The stream's waters shimmered faintly in her words, gliding over stones smoothed by countless nights. It carried reflections of the stars above, each ripple like a soft heartbeat, steady and reassuring. Travelers who paused by its edge often felt their own rhythms align, their bodies responding to the calm that had always been there, waiting quietly. Elara spoke of the creatures of the night, not to entertain, but to show the listener the subtle ways calm spreads. Fireflies moved without urgency, weaving slow patterns in the darkness. Owls rested in branches, breathing steadily, their stillness a quiet invitation. Even the grass and leaves seemed to lean into the rhythm, whispering only when it felt gentle to do so. She told of visitors who came seeking peace, carrying thoughts too heavy to rest with. Here in the valley, their burdens were not taken away but understood. The land seemed to absorb them, holding them gently until the night could carry them elsewhere, releasing tension gradually with patience. No one left hurried, no one arrived rushed. Everything moved according to its own rhythm. The listener might feel warmth traveling from head to toe, a pleasant heaviness as muscles softened, joints released, and awareness of the body expanded in a relaxed, easy rhythm. Breaths deepened naturally, the kind that come without thought, flowing steadily like the stream itself. Elara's voice lowered further, slow and melodic, each word a soft touch on the edges of consciousness. She spoke of the clearing's gentle magic, which required nothing but presence. Sitting there, one could feel a quiet reassurance that everything was exactly as it should be. Even restless thoughts were welcome, allowed to float by without urgency. Outside, the night whispered its own quiet songs. The stars blinked patiently. The wind, almost imperceptible, caressed the grasses. The stream continued its gentle conversation with stone. Everything moved together, synchronized not by force, but by the innate understanding of the night that all things could rest if only given space and care. As this part of the story drew to a close, the firelight flickered softly, shadows stretched comfortably across the walls, and the cottage held its visitor like a cradle. Sleep moved closer, unhurried, patient, and entirely welcome, folding the listener into the warmth of the valley, into the calm of the clearing, and into the gentle embrace of the night itself.
The night had grown deeper still, the kind of darkness that felt protective rather than empty, and every sound seemed to belong perfectly within it. Elara sat quietly, her hands resting lightly on the warm cup before her presence steady and calm, like the gentle rhythm of the valley itself. She began to speak once more, her voice flowing like the stream beyond the clearing, slow, deliberate, and soothing. She described the valley as it moved in harmony with the night, how each hill, each tree, each blade of grass seemed to breathe in its own time, creating a gentle cadence that spread into the heart of anyone who paused long enough to notice. Elara spoke of the soft illumination that came from fireflies, their tiny lights weaving slow patterns over the ground, each pulse like a quiet heartbeat, reminding anyone awake that stillness itself was a kind of movement, a rhythm that could carry both body and mind toward rest. The owl in the distance called once more, low and calm, then settled into silence, joining the lullaby of the night. She told of the stream as if it were a companion, moving without urgency, reflecting the moonlight and the stars above in its surface, allowing each ripple to remind travelers that everything can flow gently when there is patience. The water never hurried, and those who watched it often found that their thoughts, too, moved more slowly, softly, without strain. Elara spoke of the clearing and its magic. Here, anyone who arrived was met with quiet acceptance. There was no need to explain, to justify, or to hurry. Even worries could settle here, absorbed by the calm around them, leaving space for awareness of warmth, of breath, and of gentle stillness. The valley held them without judgment, only support, like an unseen hand resting lightly on the shoulder. Outside, the night seemed almost suspended, each sound minimal yet meaningful. The grass whispered faintly to the wind, stars pulsed slowly overhead, and the stream continued its quiet passage, every ripple a gentle echo of the calm carried in the cottage. The listener's body began to follow the same rhythm, muscles relaxing, shoulders softening, and thoughts easing into gentle currents. Elara's pauses between words stretched longer, inviting the listener to notice their own calm deepening, to feel the quiet expansion of space around them. She spoke with a soft intimacy, as if the valley itself were whispering directly to each heart, reassuring them that they were safe, that this night belonged to their rest. She concluded this part of the story with a quiet assurance that everything in the valley, from the flowing stream to the leaning grasses, existed in harmony, guiding anyone who arrived toward the slow arrival of sleep. No one was rushed, no one was pressured. The night simply held them, patient, kind, and entirely welcoming. Sleep now began to feel near, gentle and unforced, wrapping softly around the listener like a familiar, protective embrace, carrying them closer to rest with each careful breath. The night had become a gentle sea of calm, and the cottage sat at its center like a quiet harbor. Elara remained still, holding her cup, listening to the soft murmur of the fire as it pulsed steadily, an unspoken rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the valley itself. Outside, the hills breathed under the moonlight, curves softened in silver, as if even the land had exhaled fully. She began speaking again, her voice a warm current moving slowly through the room. She described the path that led through the clearing, smooth stones worn soft by countless footsteps, guiding travelers gently without demanding effort. Each step upon them carried a weightless assurance, a promise that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Elara spoke of the stream, its waters flowing endlessly, yet without hurry, carrying the reflections of the stars like whispered memories. The soft sounds of water lapping over stones seemed almost musical, harmonizing with the subtle rustle of leaves in the distant trees. Every sound felt purposeful, yet it required no attention, only presence. She described how the fireflies gathered in quiet clusters along the edges of the clearing, their gentle glow blinking slowly, rhythmically, like the pulse of calm itself. The creatures of the night moved without urgency, each following its own pace, yet perfectly in harmony with the valley. The stars above mirrored this patience, twinkling faintly, each light steady and unforced. Ilara's voice moved slowly now, their cadence matching the expanding stillness in the room. She spoke of how the valley had a memory, not of people or events, but of the quiet that passed through it. Every sigh of relief, every exhale of tension, every moment of unhurried presence was absorbed by the land and stored like a soft echo, ready to offer its warmth to anyone who needed it. The listener might feel their own body following this rhythm naturally, shoulders dropping, jaw relaxing, eyelids heavier with each pause. Even thoughts began to drift like leaves in the slow current of the stream, moving without concern, each one arriving and departing as gently as it came. Ilara's voice softened further as she described the clearing's gentle embrace, a space where one could simply be. Here, presence alone was enough. No words, no actions, no explanations were required. The valley offered its calm freely, allowing anyone within it to let go completely, to sink into the gentle, protective rhythm of night. Outside, the wind shifted just slightly, moving the grasses in soft waves, a whisper among many whispers. The stream continued its quiet journey. Stars blinked steadily, and the firelight trembled gently, casting soft shadows that seemed to cradle the room. By the end of this part, the listener could feel sleep approaching almost imperceptibly, like a familiar tide drawing them closer, steady, kind, and unhurried. The valley, the clearing, the stream, and even the night itself seemed to fold around them, offering rest with infinite patience, a gift given freely and without expectation. The night now seemed to breathe as one, the hills and trees moving gently with an unseen rhythm that filled every corner of the valley with calm. Elara remained seated by the fire, a steady presence, her cup warm in her hands and her eyes reflecting the gentle glow. The room felt perfectly balanced, quiet yet full, safe yet expansive. She began again, her voice weaving slowly through the space, describing the delicate movements of the valley after midnight. The stream had slowed even further, each ripple a soft whisper, carrying moonlight across its smooth stones. Travelers who paused beside it often felt their own thoughts slow in response, like the world itself had instructed them to rest. Elara spoke of the grasses in the clearing, bent softly by the night breeze, each blade leaning into the rhythm of the world. The fireflies hovered gently above, their lights pulsing with a subtle cadence, guiding the eye without demanding it. Even the stars seemed to twinkle slower now, their pale glimmers reassuring and constant, like tiny beacons of patience. She told of the path winding through the valley, stones smooth and steady underfoot, guiding travelers without effort or concern. Each step upon them seemed to carry the weight of the day away, leaving only the soft sense of presence, a reminder that here movement was gentle and arrival was enough. Elara described the visitors who came to the clearing, each carrying something heavy in their hearts. The valley never judged their burdens, it simply held them, absorbing weight quietly, letting the night itself slowly ease the tension. Even restless thoughts and quiet fears were welcome, allowed to drift along like leaves on the stream, free and unhurried. The listener might notice warmth spreading through their body, the way muscles settle, shoulders drop, and eyelids grow heavier, all without effort. Each breath comes slower, steadier, more complete, filling the spaces once held by worry or fatigue. Elara's voice became softer still, almost blending with the quiet of the night. She described the clearing's gentle embrace, a place where nothing needed to be done and nowhere needed to be reached. Presence alone was enough. The valley held everything, and in its patience, sleep could arrive naturally, without force, without worry, without hurry. Outside, the moon's glow touched the hills softly, casting long, tender shadows. The stream continued its quiet journey, the wind whispered faintly through the grasses, and the fire flickered low, steady, and reliable. Every element worked together in harmony, moving with purpose yet free of urgency. By the end of this part, the listener felt a deep pull toward rest. The valley, the clearing, the stream, and the night itself seemed to fold gently around them, a protective cocoon of warmth, patience, and peace. Sleep approached not as a demand, but as a welcome companion, ready to settle the mind, the body, and the heart into a calm and enduring rest. The final stretch of the night carried a softness that felt endless, like a sigh the valley had been holding for centuries. Elara remained in her chair, near the steady glow of the fire, her hands resting gently on the warm cup, her presence quiet and unhurried, as if she were a part of the night itself. She spoke now of the clearing one last time, its grass bending softly in welcome, its earth holding every sigh, every thought, and every weary step that had ever come to rest there. Here, she said, everything that had once felt heavy could finally settle. Nothing was rushed, nothing was required. The valley simply held it all, patiently, kindly, without expectation. The stream outside moved lazily, carrying moonlight and shadow in soft reflections. Elara described its surface, how even the smallest ripple seemed to mirror the rhythm of breathing in the night, slow, steady, reassuring. Travelers often forgot to notice the movement at first, but eventually they felt it in their own bodies, in the way their muscles softened, their thoughts loosened, their minds eased. Elara's voice was lower now, a gentle current that seemed to lull both listener and land alike. She spoke of the fireflies who hovered in tiny clusters, blinking slowly, almost as if reminding the world that calm can exist in the smallest lights. Even the stars above twinkled with patience, their glow steady, unwavering, a quiet promise that rest was safe and always near. She told of the hills surrounding the clearing, their gentle slopes protective, offering quiet embrace without walls or fences. The trees leaned toward each other, as if to share the weight of the night. Even the wind had slowed, brushing leaves and grasses with the faintest, most considerate touch, as though it understood the importance of gentleness. The listener might feel the final release in their body, the way tension fully melts, how every limb grows soft, how the heart and mind sync with the slow, nurturing rhythm of the valley. Each breath becomes a gentle wave, rising and falling without effort, carrying the soul closer to rest. Elara paused often, letting the quiet stretch, giving space for peace to fully settle. She spoke now less of events and more of feeling, of the deep, reassuring safety of the night, the warmth of the fire, the cradle-like embrace of the clearing, the slow, endless flow of the stream, and the patient, protective presence of the valley itself. By the time her words faded, the cottage, the clearing, and the valley all seemed to sigh together in unison, a final gesture of rest. The listener, carried by the rhythm of the night and the gentle unfolding of the story, could surrender completely. Sleep arrived now fully, not forced, not hurried, but tender, complete, and infinitely safe. The night held everything softly, the valley held everything softly, and in this gentle, enduring embrace, all worries, all burdens, and all cares could finally rest, leaving nothing but the steady warmth, the quiet glow, and the calm, peaceful promise of morning yet to come.